Okay, these are my two brass channels that I've cut off that will be put into the base of the wood duck head, into the bottom of the wood duck head. There'll be rods, these brass rods here, this brass rod here, which is fitted to this, will be protruding out of the base when I'm done. As you can see, there's some flashing that's gone on from my cutting the lengths. I've already cleaned up the flashing and evened off the ends of the longest channel I'll be using, and I'll be doing the same thing on this. Looks kind of messed up and lots of flashing, so I'm just using this small file to clean it up. And then I want to ensure that I don't have any flashing on the inside, so I just take my utility knife and clean that out on both ends. So now I've got both of the channels that will accept the pins from the base. However, I'm going to have to glue these into the bottom of the wood duck head, and in doing so I'm using 5-minute epoxy, and I don't want the 5-minute epoxy to get into the channel. So what I'm going to be doing is taking solder and just putting a cap on the end of each of these so that 5-minute epoxy won't enter into the channel and interfere with the rod, the brass rod that I'll be using as a pin. Okay, I wanted to show you how I'm going to cap off the ends of the brass channels that I've cut to accept the brass rods. It's important to use a needle nose pliers to hold onto the brass rod because it's going to get pretty hot. It's important to always use flux when you're using solder. This is the same solder that I use when I do stained glass, so actually comes out pretty works out pretty handy. This is a 60/40 solder. It's just basic regular paste flux, and then I've got a soldering iron with a 60-watt soldering iron with a tip on it. It's got solder on it already, and all I want to do is just cap off the end. You can see that that's all it took was to just touch it. It sucks right in just to the little tiny bit. That'll cap off the end. So I'll do the second one. I'm putting flux on the outside. Don't want it to go too much on the inside because I don't really want the solder to be on the inside of the channel. That would block the rod. So again, I'm going to just barely touch the end, and you can see that it's been capped off. Okay, now that the end of the channel has been blocked off with the solder and everything's cooled, you can see that the brass rod easily slides in and it has an end that stops it for both pieces here. And the pieces of rod that are protruding from the channel will be the actual part of the rod that's glued into the butternut base. The first thing I'll be doing is gluing the channel into the bottom of the wood duck head. I'll be putting them both in like so, and once I get them in, I'll be able to insert the brass rod, which will in turn allow me to mark on the base where those brass rods are making contact, so I can drill the holes accordingly. The holes that will be drilled for the brass rod to be inserted into the base will be larger in diameter, so that there's a little bit of play for that rod, which makes it a little bit easier for me in how accurate I have to be when I drill those holes. They'll be close, but to make a perfect match is much more difficult. In projects before, I've found that if I give myself a little bit of play, I don't have to work so hard at matching these up. Okay, I'm going to be drilling the holes into the bottom of the wood duck head. You can see that I've marked where I want to put those holes. The brass channel that I capped off earlier, I will be inserting into these holes, so it's going to be really important that I go straight in, and I only want to go so far. I have my trusty drill, and I'm not sure if it shows, but I have made 2 marks with the Sharpie. This is how deep the shortest one's going to be, and this is how deep the longest one will be. It'll give me a guideline and show me where I need to stop when I'm drilling the holes in. It was also very important for me to take a look at where I place these holes, because if I had drilled the holes too wide, it could have easily come through the top of the breast and neck area. So I took into consideration where I placed accordingly. Now it's going to be important for me to be very accurate. I did some testing on this piece of wood to make sure that my drill bit was the right diameter so that I can easily fit the channel in. Don't want to do the testing on your actual wood duck head or whatever else it is you're going to be fitting your brass channel into. So I just grabbed a piece of scrap Tupelo and drilled in there so I'd get a good feel. So what I'm going to be doing is drilling straight in to the head. That's the short one. And this is going to be the longer one. Okay, with my 2 holes drilled into the bottom of the wood duck's head, I'll be inserting the brass channels accordingly. I'm going to quick mix up a small amount of 5-minute epoxy, and don't need a whole lot because it's just going to go on the outside of these brass rods, and I don't want to use too much, because when I put it inside the holes, some of it's going to be displaced and pushed back out, and I don't want to have any of this epoxy get into the brass channel. So I'll be using this toothpick to put a little bit into the hole before I put the brass channel in. So I'm going to do the long one first. I'd marked it with an L so I knew it was the long one. I'm just making sure to get it applied to all the areas, all the sides of this hole. Then this is the long one, so I'm going to go ahead and place channel in and bring it just flush with the bottom of the head. Be doing the same thing with the other hole. Trying to do it as cleanly as possible. Get it nice and these aren't necessarily the right rods for the holes they're being put into, but that's not a problem right now. There we go. Looking pretty straight. And there are some gaps going on here that I will come back now and I will, because I've got the brass rods into the channel, I know that the 5-minute is not going to get in there. But I just want to seal up the gap, make it look nice and clean.